This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. Hey, BraveCo man. This week's episode is a teaching that I did on boundaries from a Boundaries Lab class. Honestly, it's one of my favorite teachings that I've done on boundaries, and I think that you guys are really going to love it. So what happens, right? We grow up in a home where what we see is a marriage that's terrible. Your mom and dad's marriage, you get brought up into an environment that's chaotic, and that's all you know. You don't have a different tool set except for that. But then you go and you get married and you start to do the same thing. Well, how does the generational curses get passed down? Through agreement. I do what my parents did. I have the same boundaries they had. I have the same communication tools as they have. I have the same chaos as they have. I may be a Christian when they weren't Christians, but what's really changed? If I haven't set new order into my life, if I haven't confronted what is, right? God separated chaos from beauty. God separated chaos. He went, chaos is just letting whatever wants to rule and reign. Chaos is no structure. Chaos is no feedback. Chaos is no instruction. Chaos is no boundaries. God goes, order, life, love, perfect love doesn't have chaos in it. We know that because the Bible says perfect love casts out what? Casts out the chaos. So when you get saved, God wanted to take you on the Israelite journey. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to take you on an exodus out of your old life into your new life, where you learn to trust him. You learn that he's the God that will part the Red Sea for you. You learn that he's the God that will be with you no matter where you go. If it's dark outside, he's the fire. If it's hot, he's the cloud. If you're hungry, he's bringing daily bread for you, daily meat for you. If you're cold, he's got something for you that doesn't wear out. But most of our wiring was wired in the old guard. And see, it's not God's job to rewire you. It's your job. It's your job to confront your fears. It's your job to confront the trauma. It's your job to get a new tool set. See, we leave way too much up to God. We say, I'm praying for provision. I like praying for provision. But you also have to give God something to bless you with. See, God didn't put a bunch of tables and trees on the earth. He put tables and chairs. He put a bunch of trees. Gosh, I hate it when I ruin my punchline. You can pray all day long that tree turns into furniture that you can sell, but that's not how it works. God goes, I gave you the tools that you need to create order, to create prosperity, to create wealth, to create a future for you. I gave you the animals. I gave you the birds. I gave you the seed. I gave you nature. But it's very hard to create a new path unless we confront the old. Right? I'm trying to lay a foundation. See, the thing is, so many of us are waiting for God to come in and to save us from our old horrible thinking. God can, he's sovereign. He could come in and do whatever he wants. Yeah, you guys believe that? He can. He didn't have to ask your permission. But he doesn't come in. He's a gentleman, right? The Bible says a lot of stuff. I thought I was at another spot that I'm at. Let me find it. Come on. Even more than what I hate when I ruin my punchline is I hate when I can't find my verse. I just know it by heart. It says that he stands at the door knocking. It's an amazing picture. The guy that owns you, that created you, that designed you, that made you in his image, he doesn't just barge into your room. He doesn't just barge into your life and go, listen, you're screwing this up. All right? I gave you a bunch of chances. You're screwing it up. You're not doing it fast enough. Now I'm going to do it. Some of you are feeling shame about how you've parented. We've all done that before. But God doesn't do that, does he? He stands at the door knocking. He says, if anyone hears, and if anyone lets me in, then I'll come in. And we'll start the process of order in your life. But God's design was a design of love. See, it says that 1 John, I have this one, says that we love because he first loved us. And so we don't love God. We don't serve God because if we don't, we'll get smoked. We don't serve God because if we don't, we'll end up with a life of chaos. The whole foundation, go back to the foundation, the whole foundation for loving God is he gave more than you will ever give. He chose when he didn't have to choose. It's back to creation story, isn't it? It's back to the creation to the creation story. For God so loved the world that he gave his son. See, we're supposed to do this process. I know it sounds like I'm preaching a salvation message, but I'm trying to, again, preach creation's message. The foundation of order, the foundation of boundaries is this message. Is that when you are in chaos, the love of God met you. That's what was supposed to happen. You were supposed to be encountered by the love of God. It says the love of God leads us to repentance. The love of God meets you, right? He doesn't come bulldoze you over. He doesn't come run you over. It's the love of God. You're experiencing this love, this overwhelming love of God. He says, you've got ashes, I'm going to give you beauty. You have mourning, I'm going to give you joy. You have broken things, I'm giving you new things. That's the relationship that when God came and proposed to you, that was his message to you. That's what he was proposing. And what you learned is that you learned that before you behave, you belonged. Before you have to go and do all these rules and regulations, you were supposed to get wooed into the kingdom. This is your origin story. This was supposed to be the story of you growing up in your home. Before you ever behaved, you were supposed to know that you belonged. While you were still pooping your diapers, you were accepted. While you were still messing up and not getting it right, you were unconditionally loved. And then from there, we make this beautiful transition, right? It says, John 14 says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. We goof this up all the time. We say, keep my commandments and I will love you. Keep my commandments, then you will belong. Do what I say, and then you'll feel cared for by me. Like, what does this have to do with boundaries? This has everything to do with boundaries. This is the foundation for all relationship. This is it. Some of you just figured out what's wrong with your marriage. I know I sound like I'm joking, but it's true. If you love me, you will do all these things. It's like, no, I don't come home and do a whole bunch of things in order to get love. I've raised kids twice now. So I raised a whole set of kids and I'm back around to raising kids again. My oldest is 24 and he's been married for 3 years. And my youngest is 1.5. I just turned 19 months. When I come home, I don't feel like playing horse. I'm 43 years old. Do you feel like playing horse when you go home? If you do, I've got a spot for you. I have a spot for you. If you feel like playing horse when you come home, I don't feel like playing horse. I don't want to play horse. But I love those kids. I love them.
I love them because I chose them. They didn't choose me. I chose them. It's my deep love that drives me to go, wee! Good, huh? That was good. Dang. It's also my deep love that is teaching them limits. Teaching them limits. Teaching them boundaries. Why am I teaching them limits and boundaries? Not because I want them to behave. I want them to have an ecosystem that produces order, where love, where peace, where joy, where the fruit of the Spirit can thrive. That's what I'm trying to gift my kids. I'm trying to give them the gift of obeying commands. I'm trying to give them the gift of structure. So many of us are afraid of structure because structure looked like legalism. And again, your life is in pain because you don't have structure. God has structure. He went day by day by day by day by day. And then he gave commandment by commandment by commandment. And then he gave orders. This is what you're going to do. This is your rule. You're not both male and both female. One of you's male and one of you's female. And you're not all going to do this thing. Not every animal is going to have the same function. You're all going to have different function. And he gave rules and parameters and boundaries to all of it. That's what I'm trying to give to my kids. I'm trying to give them a foundation so that they can arrange their life in such a way that the love is casting out the fear. That they're powerful to have their own creation story. They're powerful to set limits and parameters and boundaries and have needs. Like I said in the beginning, without needs and without boundaries, there is no way to actually feel loved. There's no way. I'll end with this. What I want you to think about for a second is what your creation story was like. Your origin story. Because we know what God had designed for us. What he had designed is that you would come in to a creation story like Adam came in. God gave Adam an inheritance when he put him on this earth. It was all this stuff to rule and reign and create. Your first inheritance was supposed to be a gift from your parents. You were supposed to come into an environment that had an ecosystem of love, of order, of structure, where you can what? You can bond to your parents. You know that kids don't have the ability to regulate their emotions when they're young. Babies don't have that ability. Well, how do they do it? They do it through co-regulating. What's that supposed to do? You're supposed to learn to depend and to trust in your parents, right? Like you feel all this chaos. That's why babies are crying. They feel a bunch of chaos. I know we've used this word a lot. They feel a bunch of chaos and mom or dad picks up the baby and starts to go. Isn't it amazing that we can still do that today and everyone feels a little bit calmer? Shh. Or some of you feel angry because your parents did that all the time. That's not the kind of, I'm doing the more brown noise, not the pink white noise, but the brown white. Okay, you don't know. You don't know. You're supposed to come up in a home where you learned, oh my gosh, the rules and the regulations are here to protect and provide and promote for me. The environment is set up to sacrifice and serve my needs so that I can grow into a healthy child. That was supposed to be your origin story, right? You're supposed to learn that you're awesome and amazing and beautiful, and you can set limits and you can ask questions and you can. I love how God doesn't stop his people from asking questions. and challenging him. If you grew up in a home where you couldn't ask questions and couldn't be challenged, it's why you want to run away from the rules and the regulations, and it's why it's so hard for you. I know this may not be the most exciting message in the world, but if you don't get the origin correct, if you don't understand how God set up the foundations of the earth and what his plan was for man, and then what your origin story into God was, and then what your origin story was when you came onto this earth, you'll have it all messed up. You understand there's like 3 birth stories. There's like how God birthed humanity, how you were born into God, and how you were born in this earth. And if you don't get those all figured out, it'll all be messed up, because you have this view of God and church and legalism and freedom and love all jacked up. And so you come in and you try to execute a boundary, but you're executing a boundary from a place of fear. You come in and you try and implement a need, but you're implementing a need from a place of control. Because you haven't actually gone through and went, wait, hold on 1 second. All this stuff is supposed to flow from a place of love and relationship. And we're going to do a lot today. So I'm the first runner up. And tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot of taking you into some of your past, and a lot of taking you into the places where you failed in setting boundaries, and a lot into taking you into why you're not executing them, and how to set a healthy boundary, and how to do all that stuff. I'm just giving you the on-ramp. I'm giving you this is what life was supposed to be like for you. Life for you in the kingdom was supposed to be a life of freedom. I don't eat the fruit. I resist the fruit, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because I trust God. I know if that looks really good, that this is going to be even better. I trust that not having sex before marriage is really the best thing. It really is going to be the most fruitful thing for my life, even though it seems crazy fun. I mean, who doesn't want to have sex before marriage? It seems awesome and so exciting. Christians are like, it's not awesome and it's not so exciting. Yes, it is. Quit lying to your kids. It's just not the best. It creates a bunch of chaos, doesn't it? I trust that delaying gratification is the best thing for me. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit, isn't it? Long suffering. Holy smokes. Our generation needs some long suffering in it, doesn't it? Our generations. We need some long suffering. I trust that if I keep on this path and I keep enduring, that you are going to take care of me, God. That's the story. The story is not my will be done, but your will. I don't do my will because your will is so much better. Doing what you want to do is so much better than doing what I want to do. We have a hard time setting limits and setting boundaries with ourselves because we don't trust the creator of it all and the creator of our story. That's not coming from God. That's coming from your origin story, from your story, from how you grew up. Okay. I'm going to take some time and do some Q&A. Marissa, are you able to run this mic? Somebody else is going to run the mic. What time am I supposed to be done, Marissa? 11:30. Okay. Perfect. I just wanted to make sure the clock was right. Okay. Yeah. So I should say this. If you have a question, which I love answering questions, make sure that you just keep your question kind of short so that we can get to as many people as we want. I love your whole story, but just not right now.
Hello, my name is Elsa. I want to ask you one question.
Yeah.
Because some people like today is a meeting, but they always like every time late for 1 hour. Maybe the class every day they will late for 1 hour, or your housemate, they will mess everything, and they just the way born chaos. So I want to ask you the question: how can I deal with these people? 1, stay away from them. 2, stay there suffering. Or 3, you give me an answer. Thank you. This is a real experience right now for me. I really need your answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's awesome. I love that. So we're going to get even more practical. So I'll answer all the questions that are asked, but Deborah and Chuck and Dan and Danny and even Havla are going to get into some really practical stuff too. So just know that. But one the beauty behind setting up boundaries is, again, it comes from a foundation that says, I can't control you. God doesn't come to you and say, hey, listen, do this or else I'll make you. So he's not like our parents. And so everything that we're doing is out of a place of relationship. So for instance, if you have a roommate that keeps coming home late, and when they come home late, they're really loud, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, like we're all past our 20s. So a roommate, I'm not going to tell my roommate, you have to be home by 10 o'clock. It's like, how about you go buy some property, beachfront property in Arizona? You just can't do it. But what I can do is I could say, hey, I'm really thankful that we're in each other's lives together. And what I would love to feel is I really want you to feel cared for by me, and I want to feel cared for by you. And sometimes when you come home late, I get woken up because things are really loud. I'm wondering, if you're going to come home late, can you either do all the stuff that you were going to do before you leave, or be really mindful that the rest of the house is sleeping? It's really hard. And I think if it continues to go on, well, you have to continue to either have the conversation like, hey, I'm starting to feel really frustrated because we talked about this 2 weeks ago, and then you come home late again and it's really noisy and it just makes me feel not cared for. Again, what you'll notice in my communication, which people will get into a lot later, but it doesn't hurt to drive it home, is I'm talking about me. I'm talking about what I'm experiencing, I'm talking about my emotions. So where it goes wrong is when I'm talking about you. So I'm saying, you come home and you do whatever you want. That's a judgment. You come home and you're noisy and you don't care that everyone else is sleeping. That's another judgment. And why conversations don't go well typically is because people are having to defend themselves from our judgments, our accusations. So a trick that works well for me is I always think how I want it to end, that's how I start it. Because they say that how a conversation starts will decide how it ends with 80% certainty. So if I start the conversation and I say, hey, every day you come home late and you don't even care, I can tell you with 100% accuracy that they're going to go, oh yeah? Oh yeah, pal? Now we're in a war, right? They're coming out and they're going to pull out their knife and we're going to have a problem. But if I start in and I think, how do I want it to end? I want it to end connected. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel cared for. I'm going to take that and I'm going to craft a good starting point. I'm going to craft a good starting point. Now, when you get to the ninja level of this, you'll be able to do it in real time with your spouse or a sibling. You'll be able to go, what they're doing right now just pisses me off so bad. That's what's going on. And then you'll think really fast. You'll think, how do I want it to end? I want it to end good. So you'll be able to say, hey, I'm really thankful for you. I want you to feel cared for by me in this moment. I'm just feeling a little bit frustrated. And again, I'm talking about myself. So I'm sure you guys are going to talk a lot about how to execute and implement boundaries. But I'm talking about myself. I'm thinking how I want it to end. I'm taking that piece, I'm putting it in the very beginning, and then I'm executing the conversation. if there's always a time, like people ask me this all the time, especially with marriage, like what do I do when I have a spouse that just continually breaks boundaries and isn't kind and isn't loving? And it's like, well, you have to set limits. You have to set limits. It's not fun. It's just, how are you setting the limit? See, because 2 wrongs don't equal a right. So you pushing past my boundaries doesn't always give me permission to punish you, right? God doesn't punish you for pushing past boundaries. He goes, hey, listen, I'll be here when you want me. I'll be here when you're willing to take a look at this. I'll be here when you're willing to change. I'll be here, because God never leaves us nor forsakes us. But he also doesn't just barge his way in. And so again, there are definitely lots of times where I have to set limits and boundaries. I'm just doing it from a place of love, which is hard to do when somebody's hurting you. It's really hard to do. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. What's up, Paul?
Hey, Jason. Good seeing you, man.
Nice hat,
Great
dude.
talk. Thank you. I don't know. Here's a question. I was wondering if you can elaborate on.
Is his mic on? There it is.
Hey. Hi, Jason.
Hey, dude.
We're together here. Wonder if you can elaborate
Yeah.
on this. I think you said, without boundaries, there's no way to feel love.
Yeah.
But then earlier said, and I'm hearing it a lot on podcasts or in church here, that love's not a feeling. And I get it. It's an action. And but are we eliminating completely that love? There's no feelings in love? Because that's what I'm getting over the last few years. And
that's such a great question.
Can you just touch on that?
Yeah. So the foundation of love isn't a feeling, it's a choice. But inside of that choice are definitely lots of feelings, if that makes sense. And so the foundation for I'm loving you is a choice to lay down my life, to serve, to believe the best, to choose the best, right? But inside of that comes all kinds of cool emotions and feelings. And so when I say without boundaries and without needs, there's no way to feel loved, I literally do mean that, because love is actions. And when I do these actions, you feel the result of that action. Does that make sense? You've experienced love, and in experiencing my love, there's an emotion with the experience. Does that make sense? And so it's like, if I don't, in you valuing your wife's needs, Haney's needs, and her boundaries, and you valuing those, you are sending I love you. I'm sacrificing for you. It's not my will. It's I am paying close attention to what matters to you, matters to me. So how we negotiate sex, that says, I care for you, I love you. And in return, it makes her feel safe and loved and cared for. And she feels the effect of that. How we negotiate kids. You're not just negotiating your kids how you want to. You're negotiating kids how we want to. It's inside of those needs. It's inside of the boundaries. It's inside of the conflict that I get this overall feeling of being cared for. So that feeling of nurture, that feeling of cared for is it's originating from I am loved, if that makes sense. And a lot of married couples really struggle because I don't actually know how to set a limit or share my needs with you. That's a very hard relationship to, like, if you won't fight with me and you won't share with me what you need, well, how the heck do we be friends? Because I need a little bit of disagreement. I say, like, hey, I was thinking about spending all of our money. Okay. It's like, I want my wife to go, don't spend all of our money. Oh, you don't want me to? No. What I want to do is I want to set up a future for us. And I go, oh, what kind of future? A future where we're financially successful. Great. Are you willing to sacrifice for that? Yes, I am. I am too. Well, now we have a goal. Now we have purpose. We have some purpose at least, right? Like, we're going somewhere. Our relationship has traction. Why? Because she has needs and she has boundaries, and I have needs and boundaries. You're starting to understand, like, relationships that don't have needs and boundaries, they don't go anywhere. They just constantly end up in, I'm trying to figure out how to read your mind. I'm trying to guess what you really want. I'm trying to guess what you really need. And it's so impossible. And it creates just underlying chaos all the time. In a marriage where, I know I'm talking about marriage a lot, but I have the mic. In a marriage where we don't engage in conflict, there's constant conflict. It's just not talked through. So you never get to a place of real peace and harmony. The peace and harmony isn't the absence of conflict. It's the result of a conflict done well. So when I don't use my courage to confront my wife, I rob us from the blessing of that conflict. And in return, I stay in a bunch of turmoil. It looks like Jesus. My wife does something that hurts my feelings. I don't want to share that my feelings are hurt because I'm ultimately afraid that she's going to get mad and punish me. Or I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected. It looks like I will pretend and tell myself, it's not a big deal. Just let it go. She's had a long day. The real truth is I'm afraid. That's the real truth. I am telling myself I'm saving her, I'm protecting her, I'm loving her, but really it's self-serving. It's a very selfish move. I'm self-serving. What happens tomorrow is I get really bitter because she does the same thing again. She does the same thing again because I don't give her any feedback, not because she's evil. Now I start to feel like I'm being taken advantage of. You know what it's like to live with you? She's like, I don't actually know what it's like to live with me. Oh, you always. Well, it's like, I don't get any feedback. Feedback is the mother of learning. So, yeah, we got to do that. Back in the back. Great questions, guys. Thank you. I'm doing my best up here.
I've heard it said that bodies have memories, and that boundaries are often your body memory of an event or something that happened to you when you were very young. And I guess my question is, does salvation and new creation, becoming a new creation, becoming focused on future present as opposed to past present, is there a wiping out of trauma and memories? Or does trauma remain in the body and does it continue to influence you?
You're going to get a lot of my opinion. So let me just start by saying I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a scientist. So I'm just a guy from Weaverville. It's true. Who's read a decent amount. So I'm not an expert on trauma at all. What I do know is that trauma does get stored up in our bodies, and it can manifest in a bunch of different ways, from an anxiety response, a warning, like that's what anxiety is an alert that's going off inside of you. It's not actually, the anxiety isn't the problem. It's your body's experience going, hey, hold on, you're in a bunch of danger. Do you know you're in a bunch of danger? You may not be in a bunch of danger. You may be standing in the middle of Trader Joe's looking at goat milk, and your body's going, you're in a bunch of danger right now. It's like, why do I feel like I'm in a bunch of danger? Oh, because I've had all these experiences in the past that are warning me. So that definitely happens, and it happens to me. I deal with that. And so does salvation, the salvation going from my old life into my new life, automatically wipe that out? In my experience, it doesn't automatically wipe that out. Can it? God's sovereign. He can 100% do whatever he wants. And I see it happen, right? Like I see people get saved and they were a drug addict, completely addicted to drugs. and bam, they get saved and they're free. How many of you have heard that testimony before? And you know it's true because like you know the guy. But then because you know the guy, you know that God didn't change his whole entire life. He's also got things that he's got to work through. Like, why didn't his cigarette addiction go away? He got off of heroin, but not off of cigarettes. God's not afraid of the process. He's not. And so again, it's James chapter 1. Consider it pure joy or hilarious laughter when you fall into unexpected trials, for the testing of your faith produces perseverance. When perseverance runs its course, you will lack nothing. It's Philippians 4. It's rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your kindness and gentleness be evident to all the Lord's near. If you need anything, feel free to ask. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. Like he's giving you these tools, these promises for how to deal with our fears, our past stuff. It's why, 300 and maybe 65 times in the Bible, depending upon the translation, God's saying, fear not. He wouldn't have to say fear not if all the fear left the day that you got saved. And so, I do think that that's the power of sozo a lot. The power of sozo's a very effective tool to help us go back into our past and introduce Jesus and the Godhead into those past experiences, to rewrite those experiences so that I'm now experiencing my present and future according to my present and future and not my past. Sozo is a great tool for that. Trauma, there's some definitely trauma therapy that's really great with that. EMDR can be good for that. And at the Transformation Center, we do all that kind of stuff. But my experience is that it's very much my experience with becoming a believer and getting a new mind and a new heart is that it's a process that we walk out and that we walk through. And it's the process of renewing your mind. It's the put on the full armor of God, right? It's like this thing that I didn't just get saved and then bam, all of a sudden I woke up Monday morning thinking, wow, I've got all good thoughts about me. All good thoughts about everyone. And being molested in my past doesn't matter to me anymore. I don't experience that. I experience that with God. I now have an advantage that I didn't have before. With God, I have access that I didn't have before to a new way of thinking. And I'm becoming like him. I'm going from glory to glory. So honestly, I'd love to go even to a new level. I know that there's got to be greater levels even. It's my thoughts. I did the best that I could. Marissa, you have a question?
We have a question from an online participant.
I was like, girl, you and I put this event on. Like, you can ask me later.
Great.
No, I'm just kidding.
So we have an online person who says, my husband keeps running from conflict, and when he does engage, it is so dominant that I feel silenced. How do I break this cycle?
Tell him everything he's doing wrong. No. And online, thank you again for asking these questions. So I think first start from a place of understanding. And this is a really powerful thing. Like, I've had to learn this with my kids. Again, it's like when my kids scream at me, they're not screaming at me because they think it's fun and they want to, or necessarily even because it's an act of defiance and disobedience. A lot of times it could be out of a place of real fear. She's really feeling afraid, or he's really feeling afraid and flooded, and that's their fear response. If I don't understand that, then my next action and move shuts down what they really need, and I don't actually meet what they really need. This is like wildly profound. I'm not saying I'm wildly profound. I'm saying this revelation that even I'm getting and parenting again is wildly, profoundly changing my mind about a lot of things in life. Because what I typically want for my kids is obedience. Don't ever scream and yell at me. Don't ever act out. Well, they can do that, but then I miss out on the gift of knowing what they're really going through. Okay, which if I look at her husband, I go like, wow, he probably feels really afraid and super overwhelmed. And the only tool that he's learned is the same tool that he's had since he's been in high school. So when I get in conflict, I, again, resist till I get more angry than I am afraid. Think about that meter. I'm afraid. So I don't say anything until like it's building pressure. I get more pressure than the cap can withstand. And that's when I get brave enough. I got to get drunk enough to get brave enough to tell you how I feel. It's not her fault, probably, and it's not her responsibility, but she could probably help some. And this isn't the only way, like people will say like, I try that and he doesn't do that. Like you can't make anybody do anything, but I would start from a place of understanding and compassion, because compassion kills judgment. And the chances that she's sitting in judgment right now is probably pretty high, because it's offensive to be yelled at all the time. And it sucks to be in a marriage where somebody doesn't want to take ownership, right? Or a relationship where somebody doesn't want to take ownership. So it's easy to be in a place of judgment. But we want to kill that, because if she comes judgmental, he'll just be defensive and they're back in their cycle. That makes sense? We just stay in this cycle forever. So back to, if she can come to him when they're not in the middle of an argument, when he can hear her, because he can't hear her when she's confronting him, because he goes straight back to anger. Again, I'm assuming a lot, but whatever. So this would be my strategy. My strategy would be that she would come to him when they're in a really connected place. And she could say something like, I really love you. And I'm really thankful for you. And I want us to grow together in our marriage. And I'd love to take the next year of our marriage and really see how we can continue to grow stronger together. I know sometimes that I feel so afraid of conflict with you. And I know sometimes that you feel so afraid of conflict with me. And honestly, I don't know that I blame you or me. It just feels like it's what we've learned and what we've done forever. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to go on a journey with me of exploring how we can together do something that we've never done. And maybe it's, would you do some counseling with me? I know I have a lot of things to grow in. Or would you, whatever, there's a bunch of different options from there. What I'm trying to get his commitment on is, I'm agreeing to do something that we haven't ever done, that feels really scary, that feels intimidating, and moving forward. Then there's a lot of options. And if I'm her, I say, I don't know that we're going to fix it all at once. And I'm not expecting you to change all at once, or even me to change all at once. I just want to go on this journey. I want our kids to feel like mom and dad's marriage got better and better and better year after year after year. Like, can we deliver that message? Maybe a letter is a way that she could do it. But she's going to have to get off the resentment and the judgment and the years of pain in order to get to that spot. And we often feel very justified in not doing that, because he's the main cause of my problems. I want to get some more questions, but I feel like this is important. I had a couple that came to my office. They've been married almost 30 years. And the first affair that he had was on their honeymoon. Yeah, that's a bummer. That's definitely a bummer. And so he had affairs for, I don't know, almost 30 years. And he had got caught. And so they're sitting in my office. And of course, she's in a ton of pain. And I'm just thinking like, man, I'm glad I'm not her, I'm just being honest. Like, that's a normal thought. It was really hard. It was really heavy. And I did the first appointment, and it's crazy. She's, talking about the experience, and he's sharing his experience, and he's, crying. And of course, she doesn't trust him, and he's not at home anymore. And so we're talking about like, how do we move forward? And at the end, she goes, I just want to know what I can work on. And I'm like, I'd get some boxing gloves on and I'd work on him. Their marriage was completely restored. They have an incredible marriage today, because she asked the question over and over and over again, what do I need to do to grow? She didn't have to ask that question. You understand? And most people don't ask that question because they feel justified in not asking that question. All she asked me the whole entire time, beyond what's my next steps, like for the relationship, is how do I grow? How do I heal? What were the things in my life that are causing pain and discomfort? She didn't have to ask that question, but that's love. Love isn't doing the bare minimum. Love is being willing to look at your 1%, even if he has the 99. And so many people ruin their marriage or get out of a marriage that they could have healed or relationship because they feel justified in, I'm the 25%, but I'm only the 25% because you were the 75%. And I know that that's a really hard thing to do, but it's the way forward. It's the pathway forward. Incredible. Yeah, we'll go right here. Hold on one sec. We can't hear you.
Thank you. Someone might touch on this in the future, but you were talking about how in the Garden of Eden, God made people based on their kind and placed, or animals, people, and placed them in an appropriate role. And so it caused me to think about childhood and being placed in a family that maybe feels like it was not of your kind, or they were not able to kind of provide an environment that you described that was loving and comforting. And so how does God, does God just, he knows the families he puts us in. And so does he just do that with like a redemptive plan in mind for down the road, or how do you kind of sort that out?
Yeah. So this is the wild thing about God, is that he's given us so much control and partnership, right? Again, he's not coming and saying, if you don't treat those kids good, I'm taking them away from you. And if you don't run this business right, I'm going to shut it down. And if you sleep with this girl, you're going to get AIDS and die. Like he does. He's not here running around punishing us, right? So he goes, I'm giving you the option. I'm giving you kids. You have the power to grow them and love them, or to crush them and ruin them. I'm giving you a bunch of power. And if you were in a home where you didn't feel like you belong, it's not because the color or... Like I have a whole bunch of friends. How many of you have a whole bunch of friends from different age groups and backgrounds, and you feel like we're closer than family? It's because God designed human beings to not it doesn't matter what race or color or even past experience. We have the ability to connect and bond and feel loved and cared for, even in the way that the animals don't. And so it wasn't like God messed up and he put you in a family where you couldn't connect and bond. It's no, your family didn't do connection and bonding. Therefore, you didn't connect and bond with him. And now what do? Well, you have to find a family outside of your family. The same way that you get broken is the same way that you get fixed. So it's like I have to insert my life into a family and build that experience that I never had back there. Go ahead.
Can that set up issues with boundaries of expecting like your newfound family to meet the unmet needs from childhood?
Well, 100%. I mean, it can, it can, your lens for who you are, right? So when you're born, I'll just go here for a second. When you're born, you were programmed and wired to believe and to trust and to think, and like you're not the one that wired you. Let's think about this for a second. If you overeat a ton, or you're stuck looking at pornography, or you drink a ton and you've done that for a very long time, chances are you weren't the one that actually created that. Like addiction in our life starts when we can no longer bear being present in our life. So when you can no longer bear being present, well, the problem with most people is they can't even friggin' remember where they couldn't bear being present. Before you were even conscious that you were conscious, you're living an environment. You're living, right? Like most of us don't remember 2, 3, and 4, and 5 years old. We have tiny memories in there, but you don't actually really remember it like you remember what 30 was like. So it's very hard to pinpoint, when did I start checking out? Well, you started checking out when your needs went unmet, because unmet needs lead to pain. So a lot of us started to learn who we are, right? That's what all of us learned, who we are, before we were even conscious. Your parents, your environment, your teachers, they were teaching you that. If you had an environment that said, you're amazing, you're awesome, you're worth sacrificing for, you're worth, then you believe that. You didn't create that. That was gifted. That's part of the inheritance. Part of the inheritance was that you were supposed to get gifted this incredible view of yourself, your environment, and God, so that you were set up for success, right? But if you got the opposite, then that's all you have. So now you have to go and fix that. You got to challenge that. So relationships feel scary and hard. And well, part of it's because you don't have any tools. And the other part is because all you know was scary and hard. And authority seems even scarier and even harder, because authority is this massive place of pain and discomfort. Although you can't quite remember all of it, that's what it was like. So you have to go and heal those places. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, that's when you come into a new family, that's part of. It's the Egypt story, is I'm getting all these new experiences, but I'm having a really hard time trusting that he's really going to take care of me. I'm having a really hard time trusting that I really am lovable, that I really don't have to perform. I'm having a really hard time trusting that I do have what it takes to go conquer these giants. I just want to hide. We would rather be slaves. Actually, the Israelites said that at one point. We would be better off being back, making bricks. And it's like, think about it. They've got free food, clothes that aren't wearing out. They're in total comfort, fire by night, cloud by day, and yet they're tormented. It's crazy. This is a crazy story. We don't think about this a lot. They're traumatized. A whole nation traumatized. And what do they want? They want normalcy. They want bondage, because bondage is what feels normal. It's why we stay in abusive relationships. Okay. I saw your hand first in the blue.
Hi. So my question is, how can I deal with resistance, manipulation on the one hand, but on the other hand, self-protection courses, withdrawal, control, confrontation, when setting boundaries? Because I think this is like really difficult. Like on the one hand, we're trying to come close to God so that he can free us from this kind of experience from our past. At the same time, maybe you're in a marriage and then you're like trying to work on it, and it's just
it's a juggle, isn't it? It's like you're gonna learn how to do the splits, and that's what it feels like, right? So it's like a three-part answer, probably. It really is like, I gotta first really understand what I need to do. Because if you don't first really understand what you need to do, then you're just kind of shooting in the dark. You're like, you're trying to do something that you've never really seen or understood before. And so that's why I love the boundaries workshop. That's why I love what we're doing. It's like, we're trying to give you a real framework so that you can see this is what to do. This is how you execute it. This is what it would look like, right? We're doing some live examples of it. And you can even go further and take the boundaries class that Deborah and Chuck put on. And you can go further and read the boundaries book. And eventually you need to be able to teach it. Because if you can't teach it, you don't really know it. But if you can teach it, you really know it. So studies show us that, man, if you read something, you only retain, 10, 12% of it. If you teach it, you retain like 75, 80% of it. That's why when people go like, how do you know all this stuff? It's like, I just have to teach it. It's because I have to teach it all the time that I know it. So first, we got to get really clear on what I am doing right and what I am not doing right. I got to get really clear. That's why feedback is so important. That's why practice is so important, is that I'm going to try and fail. It's got to be okay to try and fail. Then I think I got to start addressing what happens in me when I got to start addressing the triggers inside of me. So like if I start to really understand myself, then I just know when I come into the room and Deborah comes up to give me a hug, I feel nervous. Ugh. I just know, but I know that's me. I know it's not her because I've started to understand like, okay, how do I work? I didn't get really affection wasn't normal in my home, which it was. This is why this is not a real example. I love her hugs. Affection wasn't normal in my life. I know when I get around somebody who's eager to give me some affection, it makes me feel uncomfortable. That's my issue. So I'm going to start to work on that. I'm going to start to do the things that it takes to take the pin out of, put the pin back in that grenade. I'm going to just work on those triggers. I'm going to remind myself, I'm going to focus on it, be cognitive of those. There's other triggers. It's like disagreement may be a trigger for you. Your husband says, no, I don't like it like that. And all of a sudden you're like, we're about to get in a battle. This is about to be a war. And you go like, oh, no, I actually want to be able to disagree with my husband, right? Like how many of you want to be able to disagree with your spouse? The only other option is we have to agree. And that's its own kind of hell. So it's like, but how many of you get nervous around disagreement? How many of you won't raise your hand? Doesn't matter what I ask. So if you get nervous around it, like, oh, that's a triggered. So I have to start working on that. How do I work on it? I first be really aware of it. Really aware. This is you. This is not them. I'm telling myself a story that probably isn't true. Well, it will be true unless I get new tools. So this is where, right? Like every time we've gone down this path, it ends up in a fight. Okay, well, now I've got new tools. So I've seen what I want to do. I know when I do it. Now I need to get the tools to do it correctly. Does that make sense? Which is what we're trying to do here. Like I see that my husband and I blow up, have these fights. Okay. I know that I do that as soon as I feel the disagreement happened. Okay. Now I'm going to gear up and prepare and look for the disagreement to happen because I need a chance to do it right. I'm excited about our next disagreement. We're both disagreeing that we need a disagreement. That's a disagreement. I'm ready to do it because I have tools for it. Now I'm going to come and I'm going to go, oh, you're upset. You disagree with me. That's not a commentary on me. That's a commentary on where you're at. Maybe I need to listen to understand. I've got really clear steps. I'm going to listen to understand. Tell me about what you feel. And he goes, oh, I just don't feel like we should be eating dinner at 12 o'clock at night. And you go, oh, wow. And I'm going to validate his emotion. I'm going to say, yeah, I can understand that you don't feel like we should eat dinner. And I'm going to ask him a lot of questions, right? And then I'm going to share my heart, but I'm going to do it from about talking about me. And what helps people is to actually write, like if you know your cycle and you know what you do every time, is to write down the steps that you're actually going to do in the conversation. So we're doing it from a piece of paper. People go like, oh, that's so generic. You know what's really bad is to do the same old thing every time. How are you going to remember something that you've never done? I teach firearm safety. Actually, I teach long range shooting. I know I'm a minute over, but you guys paid for this, so it's fine. When we teach how to shoot out to 1,000 yards or 1,400 yards, I don't set a guy behind the rifle and say, hit that spot. I teach him a process that he has to do every single time. And it's math. If you adjust your parallax, if you adjust the elevation, if you get behind the rifle correctly, if you squeeze the trigger perfectly, you are going to hit the mark every single time. Anyone in here could do it. I'm teaching them to learn a process. And a lot of our life is so much more process than it is organic, like we think about it. So that's what we're all trying to learn. I'm trying to learn a process for when I'm standing in the middle of chaos, whether that's me and my wife, me and my kids, that I've learned the right process that leads me. I can be in the valley of the shadow of death and have no fear because I understand the process. Does that make sense? That's how guys go into battle and function well. They've done the process so many times that I'm in the middle of the valley of the shadow of death. I don't have any fear because he's with me and I know what I'm doing. I'm not lost, right? In the middle of this, I know where I'm going. Father, I thank you, Lord, that you created us to live in a life of order. That you took chaos, you took formless and void, you took deep darkness, and you created and organized and structured beauty, order, peace, comfort, production, strategy, purpose. All of that was in our design. And Lord, you designed each one of us to live inside of that on this planet, Lord. God, so many of us didn't live in that because of our own origin story. How we came into you and how we came into this planet, Lord. It was just chaotic. It was formless, it was void, it was deep darkness. It was the same, it was if you had never structured it. And Lord, I ask, God, that as we go through the next 2 days, God, that you'd begin to bring into perfect alignment, perfect order, perfect structure. God, that we could walk how you designed us to walk, God. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, y'all, thank you so much. I had a really great time. We are taking a lunch break, and we'll be back at 1, which means we start at 1. So listen, little boundaries for you. We would feel loved and cared for if you were in your seats by 12:55. Does that sound great?
Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, you are already behind. Go ahead and click right here to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch last week's episode. And listen, if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, you can check out some of our new hats that we have in stock and all our other swag. Go to braveco.org and you can look at our store there. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.